Greetings, and welcome to the Modern Alchemist channel. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is Concept Corner on the Map, the Modern Alchemist podcast. Today on Concept Corner, we're going to take a moment and talk about meditation, what it is and what it is not. So, you're ready to talk about meditation? I am. Let's begin.
Shall we begin? Let's begin now. Let's begin now.
Okay, so I have been asked many times, how do I meditate? And if I, in fact, meditate at all. And to which I respond, I meditate regularly. However, I do not have a devotional period set aside at any point in my day for meditation. This is because I tend to slip into a meditative state periodically throughout my day when I'm trying to resolve certain things, because for me, meditation is a tool. But in order to understand this, in order to understand that meditation is a tool, and for those of you out there, I know that if you did a Google search in YouTube and you were looking up like helps for meditation, you're probably going to find 1,000 links to different websites that supply music and chants and inspirational, deep diving, soft narration. And that's all cool, you know. The reason that this stuff keeps selling is because it's like putting a Band-Aid on something that never heals, because you never treat the wound. You just are kind of covering it over with an activity that requires constant maintenance. Instead of approaching it, we approach meditation from this standpoint like eating, right? So you need to eat to sustain yourself, and to sustain your conscious process, you need to meditate. I disagree with this. To me, this is wildly impractical. I was a businessman and worked in corporate America, and there just isn't time. No one has time to sit here and just set aside an hour. I mean, it's awesome, but then you wind up getting up early or going to bed early or finding there's too much. And I'm sure this resonates with a lot of you who work. It's just too much to sit here and demand that that's required. And so I'm going to give you the alternative I discovered. And the alternative is based on just understanding what meditation actually is, what it means, and how it is used. Okay? The first thing that is helpful in understanding this process then is to define the word meditate. Okay? And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at the word meditate. We're going to see what it means, where it's drawn from. It's drawn from the Latin word for meditare, which then has several different variations. And so let's take a look. All right, here we are. This is LatDic, the Latin Dictionary and Grammar Resource. This is a great place to go if you want to just break down something, you understand a Latin phrase or word and you want to understand its meaning. The word is the thing, you guys. It's everything. To understand the language that you are speaking and using, and to select the words which have the greatest impact on consciousness by understanding its utility and its nuance. This is an important part of becoming an alchemist. The first thing I keep saying is that alchemy is a language. And it's funny, I read recently Paulo Coelho's masterwork, The Alchemist, again. I love that book. And one of the key points in that book is learning the language of the world. This is how I do what I do, is that I have learned this language, and it is not only spoken, it is seen, it is experienced. So understanding the meaning of a word, where it comes from, and its significance is so very important. All right, so let's take a look at the Latin results for meditare. Now, meditare then means to, and it has these different roots here, meditor, meditare, and meditatis. Each of these, the initial definition, it means to consider, contemplate, ponder, to devise and plan, to think about, and to reflect on. So these are core words, or definitions rather, to define the term meditate. But there's more to it than that. When we look at the word medi, the root of meditate, medi means to be in the middle. And so you get pretty much everything that then has a medi. Like Mediterranean means the Mediterranean Sea is the sea in the middle of the earth, right? To medium, it's the temperature directly in the center. And so when considering the positionality of your thinking process, when one meditates, one must stand in the middle of 2 points of view. And this brings me to the art of thinking, human alchemy and the art of thinking. I did a video a while back where I described the conscious process of the human being. The fact that human consciousness is divided between a subjective self, an objective self, and a middle self. That the subjective self is the I. It is the sense of my I-ness. I feel angry. I feel happy. I am in love. It is the I am. It is literally the I through which the spirit of the universe flows and is nuanced and modulated and changed. Much like the eye of a needle as the thread passes through it. And the friction of that thread, the thread could be seen as the spirit in that analogy. The eye then is sensitive only to its immediacy, meaning that it says, I am here, I exist, I think. And the irony is that the I thinks, but it uses a different kind of consciousness. It feels. The I feels. Everything about the I is about feeling. Now, this stands in immediate contrast to the objective self. The objective self has that 50,000 foot altitude. It can see all things. It is not emotionally invested in anything. And its sense of consciousness is dry and lucid and clear and calm. It is always calm. There is no emotional state or investment in the objective self, because the objective self is capable of looking and identifying all things, all the things around it, and seeing where it takes its place amid all of those things. The subjective self is like the sergeant in the trench. The objective self is like the general with the satellite feed. Okay? The middle self, this is the sense of self that exists between those 2 points of view. The middle self is the me. So the I is the subjective self. When one speaks of oneself as myself, they've withdrawn verbally and are looking at their self, their I, from an objective standpoint. And so the myself is the objective standpoint. And the me is the union of spirit and body. It is the union of the objective self and the subjective self. It becomes the soul. Okay? Which is why we fret so much in literature and religion about the salvation of one's soul, because the soul exists momentarily. It is the body and the spirit combined. That makes the soul. The soul is physical. That's why a lot of times you'll hear people who understand this concept, when a plane wrecks or something, they'll say 200 souls were lost this day. It's because the soul is unique. It is the unique expression of what happens to universal spirit as it is translated through flesh and blood and body. So each of these processes engender a person with a cognitive state. And the central state, the middle pillar, the me, that person also has a cognitive state, which is a hybridization of the union of the previous two states that I mentioned. Okay? It's important to know this. It's important to remember this, because this is the foundation and cornerstone upon which you can build your conscious state in every meditation that follows hereafter. Because you're observing yourself through this entire process, which leads me to the fourth conscious state. It seems like some of this always comes into force. And the fourth conscious state is what I call the third-party observer. This conscious state is the state that exists, that is aware that thinking is taking place. And it seems that if you cognate on the third-party observer, and in your meditation, when you're contemplating this, you will find that the third-party observer can infinitely retreat. It's sort of like looking at yourself between two mirrors, and you get that look of how things just stretch on into infinity. And so that's how that works. So meditation then is a process of standing between these two conscious states and thinking. And the process of thinking is the process of allowing consciousness then to flow. All right? So now that you know what your consciousness is divided into on a rudimentary basis, now that you know a little bit about what you are, let's talk about what you are doing when you meditate. All right, so let's talk about what you are doing. Okay, we know what you are now. You are a conscious entity with a divided state of consciousness, and that state of consciousness is divided into three components, speaking in general terms. All right, but what are you doing? Well, let's talk about something that you do all the time. And this process is the start point that allows one to begin, okay? To begin to clear their minds and to move forward with thought. Eventually, you won't need to do this. But for now, I personally advise that you use this technique as a means of directing your conscious state into a fine line, so that you can then take that conscious state and then just simply shift gears and move it towards something else. The way to do this is to think about the process of your breath. I'm drawing this concept from many tantric works. And for those of you out there who hear the word tantra and think sex, realize that that's about 2% of all of tantra, really. That Tantra stands as a polar opposite to yoga. So these are two concepts that literally yoga would stand on the pillar of severity and Tantra on the pillar of mercy. Yoga says discipline one's body. Tantra says experience one's body. Okay? So, and this is where the sex comes in, right? Because experience your body, that's like one of the more intense pleasure through that is one of the more intense experiences, so go with that. And a lot of people get caught up in that, and they lose the truth, they lose the essence of it, the spirit of it, which is really that these are two concepts in opposition. The only reason why I suggest that the sense of going with it is on the left and not going with it is on the right is just the concept of the yes and the no. The yes comes from the left pillar, and the no, from the right. And the reason for that is because no creates limitation. No creates walls and definition. You are a human being. You're not a bird, type of thing. So that negative force, then, that resistance, is indicative of the pillar of severity, which is capped by Saturn, which is another term for Brahma, which would be the creator god. Any creator divinity, by the way, can also be tied to a divinity of death because of limitation, because of no. Okay? So these are all things to think about at some other time, but for right now, recognize that these two ideas, the yes and the no, are standing in polar opposition, but they truly are speaking of degrees of the same concept. So in the middle, then, you reside. So going with this concept of breathing and understanding the flow of one's breath, let's talk about the 4 stages of breathing. All right, let's talk about the 4 stages of breathing. They are no breath, inhalation, sustaining the breath, meaning you're holding your breath, and then exhalation, which leads to no breath again, right? So you start over. So each one of these represents a conscious state. The state of consciousness is felt. It is experienced on all levels. It is felt physically, because you're in your body experiencing what it feels like to breathe. It is experienced consciously in your mind, because you are experiencing the sensation of what that feels like and cataloging it objectively. I can feel my lungs inflate. I can feel my lungs burn. I can feel my lungs relax. These are all kind of sensations, and of course, that sensation then can spread out through the rest of your body, all the way to your fingers and toes and the top of your head. And this is a very real experience that is all the time and almost always ignored. So by paying attention to something like this, it allows you to focus your mind like a laser, because a focus on your breath is a focus on your life. It is the most important thing you do all the time. If you're not breathing, you're dead. So it literally is the most important thing you do all the time. You got to breathe. To focus on something that important that you ignore all the time gives you extraordinary cognitive focus and power. So this is how it's done. Go ahead and breathe in and out naturally a couple times. And then when you're ready to begin, go ahead and exhale and begin in a state of emptiness. In this state, you have no air inside of you. However, you are able to live. It is a short period. Some of us, maybe a minute or two, depends on how practiced you are and how athletic you are and your actual level of oxygen conversion ratio, right? Like this is something that just is based on your health. But regardless of the nature of your physical health, you can experience the sensation of emptiness, whether it's for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. Focus on that, because you're going to repeatedly experience this as we're talking. So allow yourself to feel that. And as you progress through this meditation, recognize that you can extend the length of this period of emptiness. where it's just you. It's just you. You alone. What you have taken from the universe and are using right now, and that is the oxygen you've consumed all the way up until this point, that's in you now. It's part of you. It's you. It's all by yourself. There is nothing else. You are empty. It is you. Eventually, this is unsustainable. Eventually, you will feel the pressing need to breathe. Resist the urge to inhale and sustain the emptiness as long as is comfortable. And as you're doing that, focus on what that feels like and then think about the sensation of feeling. So you're feeling your sensations and you're thinking about what that feels like. This pulls both of those pillars right to the front of you so that you have both the objective self thinking about what it feels like to feel and the subjective self feeling entirely. Because eventually you'll start to feel that burn and the need to inhale. When eventually you get to the point where you feel the need to inhale, do not gasp. Simply open your mouth or inhale through your nose, whichever is more comfortable, and just take in some air. Slowly enjoy the feeling of your lungs expanding. Enjoy the sensation of what that feels like to be fed by oxygen. You see, this is something that most rarely think about. We think when we're fed, it's got to be food and water. But the lung is processing this in just as an important way as any other organ in the body. And it is exchanging chemicals in a way that we have no machines that can do this, like the lung can do this. It's miraculous and amazing. It's electrical. This is an electrical exchange of elements where oxygen is exchanged and carbon is drawn from the blood and exhaled. So as you're inhaling, this is all a component of that. As you're inhaling, you realize also that the air which is entering into your body is coming in from everywhere. That this air has existed for a long time. I mean, it's produced by the plants around you. It's renewed by the environment around you. And yet, this is a closed environment, folks. So the air you're breathing connects you to every other point in the world physically, by extension, because that air has traveled around the world. That air has been a component of other breath, other people breathing, other organisms respirating. That air that you breathe right now sustains not just you and your very grateful lungs, it sustains everything. It is connected to everything. And that can give you a sense of unification. When your lungs are finally full, you get to enjoy the third state of consciousness. You are sustained, you are full, your lungs are full, you can feel your chest expand, you can feel your consciousness illuminate and burn and become stronger because you are fed by all that rich oxygen. But eventually it's not enough. Eventually, sustaining that feeling is not enough because what you have within you must be exhaled. It must be released. You're going to feel extraordinary pressure eventually as you hold that air in, resist the urge to exhale, and experience what that feels like. Let that moment extend longer and longer and longer. Hold on to your air with avarice and don't let it go until at last you absolutely must. And when you do, don't blow out your air in one fast gush. Let it pass between your lips and nose. Let it slowly pass out until you're completely empty. And then sustain that moment and be empty again. And be prepared to resume that cycle over again. And again. And again. And again. This technique has been pivotal in every function of my life. Understanding this four-functioned flow and then allowing my mind to work both sides. Because once you've done this, it only takes a few minutes. This is like a 5-minute thing. This is the process. Now, what this process does then is it allows you to focus your mind. Because now that you've focused it on the most important thing in your life, which is breathing, then you can focus on everything else. And you can begin to take things apart because you've already geared your mind up to attending how something feels and what you think about the situation. What you think about those feelings. So important, so critical. And you'll find that literally you'll get to a point where it will go from I need 10, 15 minutes, and then 5 minutes, and then 3 minutes, and then it just takes a couple breaths. Literally, you just pause. You set the subjective self aside for a moment, and you say, okay, dude, chill out for 2 seconds here. I need to breathe. And then you just breathe. And you focus on everything I just said. You focus on that entire experience now reduced into normal breathing. Now reduced into the natural flow and cycle of your life. This is the technique that'll help you. All right, so now you know. Now you know what you are, and now you know what you're doing. And what you can do with what you're doing. I'll be talking to you soon.